You've talked about it, but it's just interesting, the intensity of feeling you have. You've had this famous phrase about Hunter Biden and children in the basement. Can you just revisit this case? So let me give another perspective on the situation of January 6th and Trump in general. It's possible that January 6th and things of that nature revealed that our democracy is actually pretty fragile, and that Trump is not a malevolent and ultra competent malevolent figure, but is simply a jokester. And he just, by creating the chaos, revealed that it's all pretty fragile. Because you're a student of history, and there's a lot of people like Vladimir Lenin, Hitler, who are exceptionally competent at controlling power, at being executives and taking that power, controlling the generals, controlling all the figures involved, and certainly not tweeting, but working in the shadows behind the scenes to gain power. And they did so extremely competently, and that is how they were able to gain power. The pushback with Trump, he was doing none of that. He was creating what he's very good at, creating drama, sometimes for humor's sake, sometimes for drama's sake, and simply revealed that our democracy is fragile. And so he's not this once in a generation horrible figure.
Once in a generation narcissist. No, I don't think he's a truly scary, sinister, Putin-like or Hitler, much less Hitler-like figure. Not at all. I mean, he's not ideological. He doesn't care about anything beyond himself. So it's not. No, he's much less scary than any really scary, totalitarian, right? I mean, and he's
more Brave New World than 1984.
This is what Eric Weinstein never stops badgering me about, but he's still wrong, Eric. I can my analogy for Trump was that he's an evil Chauncey Gardner. I don't know if you remember the book or the film Being There with Peter Sellers. But Peter Sellers is this gardener who really doesn't know anything, but he gets recognized as this wise man and gets promoted to immense power in Washington because he's speaking in these kind of in a semblance of wisdom. He's got these very simple aphorisms, or what seem to be aphorisms. He's just talking. All he cares about is gardening. He's just talking about his garden all the time. Yeah. But he'll say something. But in the spring, the new shoots will bloom, and people read into that some kind of genius, insight politically, and so he gets promoted. And so that's the joke of the film. For me, Trump has always been someone like an evil Chauncey Gardner. I mean, he's. It's not to say he's totally. Yes, he has a certain kind of genius. He's got a genius for creating a spectacle around himself. Right? He's got a genius for getting the eye of the media always coming back to him. But it's a kind of self-promotion that only works if you actually are truly shameless and don't care about having a reputation for anything that I or you would want to have a reputation for, right? It's like the pure pornography of attention, right? He just wants more of it. I think the truly depressing and genuinely scary thing was that we have a country that, at least half of the country, given how broken our society is in many ways, we have a country that didn't see anything wrong with that. Bringing someone who obviously doesn't know what he should know to be president, and who's obviously not a good person, right? Obviously doesn't care about people, can't even pretend to care about people really, right? In a credible way. And so, I mean, if there's a silver lining to this, it's along the lines you just sketched. It shows us how vulnerable our system is to a truly brilliant and sinister figure, right? I mean, like, I think we are, we really dodged a bullet. Yes, someone far more competent and conniving and ideological could have exploited our system in a way that Trump didn't. And that's, so if we plug those holes eventually, that would be a good thing, and he would have done a good thing for our society, right? I mean, one of the things we realized and I think nobody knew. I mean, I certainly didn't know it, and I didn't hear anyone talk about it. Is how much our system relies on norms rather than laws,
Yeah, civility
right?
almost.
Yeah, it's just like it's quite possible that he never did anything illegal. Truly illegal. I think he probably did a few illegal things, but like illegal such that he really should be thrown in jail for it. Um, at least that remains to be seen. So all of the chaos, all of the all of the diminishment of our stature in the world, all of the opportunity costs of spending years focused on nonsense. Um, all of that was just norm violations. All of that was just all a matter of not saying the thing you should say. But that doesn't mean they're insignificant, right? It's not that it's not illegal for a sitting president to say, no, I'm not going to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, right? We'll wait and see whether I win. If I win, it was the election was valid. If I lose, it was fraudulent, right?
But aren't those humorous perturbations to our system of civility such that we know what the limits are, and now we start to think that and have these kinds of
But
discussions?
that wasn't a humorous perturbation because he did everything he could. Granted, he wasn't very competent, but he did everything he could to try to steal the election. I mean, the irony is he claimed to have an election stolen from him, all the while doing everything he could to steal it, declaring it fraudulent in advance, trying to get the votes to not be counted as the evening wore on, knowing that they were going to be disproportionately Democrat votes because of because of the position he took on mail-in ballots. I mean, all of it was fairly calculated. The whole circus of the clown car that crashed into Four Seasons landscaping, right? And you got Rudy Giuliani with his hair dye, and you got Sidney Powell, and all these grossly incompetent people lying as freely as they could breathe about election fraud, right? And all of these things are getting thrown out by largely Republican election officials and Republican judges. Um, it wasn't for want of trying that he didn't maintain his power in this country. He really tried to steal the presidency. He just was not competent, and the people around him weren't competent. So that's a good thing, and it's worth not letting that happen again.
But he wasn't competent, so he didn't do everything he could.
Well, no, he did everything he could. He didn't do everything that could have been done by someone more competent.
Right, but the tools you have as a president, you could do a lot of things. You can declare emergencies, especially during COVID. You could postpone the election.
Right.
You can create military conflict. That any kind of reason to postpone the election. There's a lot of ways to.
But he tried to do things, and he would have to have done those things through other people, and there are people who refused to do those things. There are people who said they would quit. They would quit publicly, right? I mean, this you start again. There are multiple books written about the last hours of this presidency, and the details are shocking in what he tried to do and tried to get others to do, and it's awful, right? I mean, it's just awful that we were that close to something, to a true unraveling of our political process. I mean, it's the only time in our lifetime that anything like this has happened, and um, it's deeply embarrassing, right? For on the world stage, it's just like we looked like a banana republic there for a while, and we're the lone superpower. It's not good, right? And so we shouldn't like. There's no the people who thought, well, we just need to shake things up, and this is a great way to shake things up, and having people storm our Capitol and smear shit on the walls. That's just more shaking things up, right? It's all just for the lulls. Um, there's a nihilism and cynicism to all of that, which again, in certain people, it's understandable. Frankly, it's not understandable if you've got $1 billion and you have a compound in Menlo Park or wherever. It's like there are people who are cheerleading this stuff who shouldn't be cheerleading this stuff, and who know that they can get on their Gulfstream and fly to their compound in New Zealand if everything goes to shit, right? So there's a cynicism to all of that I think we should be deeply critical of.
What I'm trying to understand is not and analyze is not the behavior of this particular human being, but the effect it had in part on the division between people. And to
Yeah.
me, the degree, the meme of Sam Harris's brain being broken by Trump represents you're like the person I would look to bridge the division.
Well, I don't think there is something profitably to be said to someone who's truly captivated by the personality cult of Trumpism, right? Like, there's nothing that I'm going to say to. There's no conversation I'm going to have with Candace Owens, say, about Trump that's going to converge on something reasonable, right?
You don't think so?
No, I mean, I haven't tried with Candace, but I've tried with many people who are in that particular orbit. I mean, I've had conversations with people who won't admit that there's anything wrong with Trump, anything.
So I'd like to push for the empathy versus reason.
Hmm.
Because when you operate in the space of reason, yes. But I think there's a lot of power in you, Sam Harris, showing that you're willing to see the good qualities of Trump, publicly showing that. I think that's the way to win over the
But
Candace
he has so
Owenses.
few of them. He has fewer good
But,
qualities than virtually anyone I can name, right?
but
So he's funny. I'll grant you that he's funny. He's a good entertainer.
there's others. Look at just policies and actual impacts he had.
I've admitted that. No. So I've admitted that many of his policies I agree with. Many of his policies. I mean, so probably more often than not, at least on balance, I agreed. So I agreed with his policy that we should take China seriously as an adversary, right? I think, I mean, again, you have to. There's a lot of fine print to a lot of this because the way he talks about these things and many of his motives that are obvious are things that I don't support. But I mean, take immigration. I think it's obvious that we should have control of our borders, right? Like, I don't see the argument for not having control of our borders. We should let in who we want to let in, and we should keep out who we want to keep out, and we should have a sane immigration policy. So I didn't necessarily think it was a priority to build the wall, but I never criticized the impulse to build the wall because if tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are coming across that border and we are not in a position to know who's coming, that seems untenable to me. So, and I can recognize that many people in our society are, on balance, the victims of immigration. Because, and there is in many cases a zero sum contest between the interests of actual citizens and the interests of immigrants, right? So, I think we should have control of our borders. We should have a sane and compassionate immigration policy. We should let in refugees, right? So Trump on refugees was terrible, but no, like I would say 80% of the policy concerns people celebrated in him are concerns that I either share entirely or certainly sympathize with, right? So, like, that's not the issue. The issue is,
A threat to democracy in some
well,
fundamental way.
the issue is largely what you said it was. It's not so much the person; it's the effect on everything he touches, right? He has this superpower of deranging and destabilizing almost everything he touches and sullying and compromising the integrity of almost anyone who comes into his orbit. I mean, so you looked at these people who served, as his chief of staff or in various cabinet positions, people who had real reputations, for probity and level-headedness. Whether you shared their politics or not. I mean, these were real people. These were not, some of them were goofballs, but many people who just got totally trashed by proximity to him, and then trashed by him when they finally parted company with him. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just people bent over backwards to accommodate his norm violations, and it was bad for them, and it was bad for our system. But none of that discounts the fact that we have a system that really needs a proper house cleaning. Yes, there are bad incentives and entrenched interests. And yeah, I'm not a fan of the concept of the deep state, but because it has been so propagandized. But yes, there's something like that, that is not flexible enough to respond intelligently to the needs of the moment, right? So there's a lot of rethinking of government and of institutions in general that I think we should do, but we need smart, well-informed, well-intentioned people to do that job. And the well-intentioned part is hugely important, right? Just give me someone who is not the most selfish person anyone has ever heard about in their lifetime, right? And what we got with Trump was that literally the one most selfish person I think anyone could name. I mean, and again, there's so much known about this man. That's the thing. It's like it predates his presidency. We knew this guy 30 years ago. Yeah, and this is what, to come back to those inflammatory comments about Hunter Biden's laptop. The reason why I can say with confidence that I don't care what was on his laptop is that there is, and that includes any evidence of corruption on the part of his father. Right now, there's been precious little of that that's actually emerged. So it's like there is no, as far as I can tell, there's not a big story associated with that laptop as much as people bang on about a few emails. But even if there were just obvious corruption, right? Like Joe Biden was at this meeting and he took, this amount of money from this shady guy for bad reasons, right? Given how visible the lives of these two men have been, right? I mean, given how much we know about Joe Biden and how much we know about Donald Trump and how they have lived in public for almost as long as I've been alive, both of them, the scale of corruption can't possibly balance out between the two of them, right? If you show me that Joe Biden has this secret life where he's driving a Bugatti and he's living like Andrew Tate, right, and he's doing all these things I didn't know about, okay, then I'm going to start getting a sense that, all right, maybe this guy is way more corrupt than I realized. Maybe there is some deal in Ukraine or with China that is just like, this guy is not who he seems. He's not the public servant he's been pretending to be. He's been on the take for decades and decades, and he's as dirty as can be. He's all mobbed up, and it's a nightmare. And he can't be trusted, right? That's possible if you show me that his life is not at all what it seems. But on the assumption that having looked at this guy for literally decades, right, and knowing that every journalist has looked at him for decades, just how many affairs is he having? Just how much, how many drugs is he doing? How many houses does he have? Where, what are the obvious conflicts of interest? You hold that against what we know about Trump, right? And I mean, the litany of indiscretions you can put on Trump's side that testify to his personal corruption, to testify to the fact that he has no ethical compass. There's simply no comparison, right? So that's why I don't care about what's on the laptop. Now, if you tell me Trump is no longer running for president in 2024, and we can put Trumpism behind us, and now you're saying, listen, there's a lot of stuff on that laptop that makes Joe Biden look like a total asshole. Okay, I'm all ears, right? I mean, it was in 2020, it was a forced choice between a sitting president who wouldn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power and a guy who's obviously too old to be president, who has a crack addicted son who lost his laptop. And I just knew that I was going to take Biden in spite of whatever litany of horrors was going to come tumbling out of that laptop.
And that might involve so the actual quote is, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in the basement. There's a dark humor to it, right? Which is, I think you speak to. I would not have cared. There's nothing. It's Hunter Biden. It's not Joe Biden. Whatever the scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, it is infinitesimally compared to the corruption we know Trump was involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, is what you're speaking to. But let me make the case that you're really focused on the surface stuff, that it's possible to have corruption that masquerades in the thing we mentioned, which is civility. You can spend hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions towards the war in the Middle East, for example,
Mm.
something that you've changed your mind on in terms of the negative impact it has on the world. And that, the military industrial complex, everybody's very nice, everybody's very civil, just very upfront. Here's how
Mm.
we're spending the money. Yeah, it sometimes somehow disappears in different places, but that's the way. War is complicated, and everyone is very polite. There's no coke and strippers or whatever is on the laptop. It's very nice and polite. In the meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of civilians die. Hate, just an incredible amount of hate is created because
Mm.
people lose their family members, all that kind of stuff. But there's no strippers and coke on a laptop.
Yeah,
So,
but it's not just superficial. It is when someone only wants wealth and power and fame. That is their objective function, right? They're like a robot that is calibrated just to those variables, right? And they don't care about the risks we run on any other front. They don't care about, environmental risk, pandemic risk, nuclear proliferation risk, none of it, right? They're just tracking fame and money and whatever can personally redound to their self-interest along those lines. And they're not informed about the other risks we're running, really. I mean, in Trump, you had a president who was repeatedly asking his generals, why couldn't we use our nuclear weapons? Why can't we have more of them? Why do I have fewer nuclear weapons than JFK? Right, as though that were a sign of anything other than progress, right? Um, and this is the guy who's got the button, right? I mean, somebody's following him around with a bag, waiting to take his order to launch,